postpartum hair, check. Insane red nose for absolutely no reason, check. So I really want to share my postnatal depression journey so that we can raise awareness of it, so that other people know they're not alone. And I think it's really important to share what mental illness can look like when you're a parent, or especially a new mum. And I just want to say that anything that I chat about doesn't necessarily mean if you relate that you've got postnatal depression. I'm in no way a healthcare professional or whatever. This is just my experience and what I went through. This is not meant to be like, oh my god, I relate to that crazy lassie, I must be ill. Many of the things I say are just part of parenthood, you know? Like, I still experience them now, 5 years later. So it doesn't mean that you're necessarily ill. But I just want to make it clear that you're not here for a diagnosis. You're here to listen to my story, and maybe you relate, maybe you don't. If you don't, I don't know why you're here. It's a bit weird. Maybe you're just wanting to hear a chat about some crazy ma talking shite. I don't know. I don't judge, but whatever. So my story begins with the birth of my daughter, and I'm going to say that's exactly where my postnatal depression began, because the birth of my daughter wasn't the birth that everyone makes it out to be. It wasn't the best day of my life. In fact, I found it very traumatic and very painful. And I don't mean painful as in there's a baby coming out your vagina that's going to hurt. I mean mentally painful and mentally draining, and it was a lot to process, and it took me years to process what happened and how I felt and why I felt that way. So after the birth, we did what most parents do, you know, you take the baby home and you really stress out about the baby and the baby's welfare and how the baby's eating and sleeping and lying and are they breathing every 2 fucking minutes. And in hindsight, we were really stressed. We were really the classic new parents, you know, fretting over everything and anything. You bring your newborn home and you're in charge of keeping it alive and well and fed and bathed, and you come home with this baby and this overwhelming responsibility. And I chose to breastfeed my daughter exclusively, which added in a whole new level of, well, I can't really say it's a whole new level of stress because I can't tell you how it would have been if I didn't breastfeed. But what it brought for me was extreme sleep deprivation. It brought a whole lot of stress. We struggled to establish breastfeeding for months. And I remember it being months because I remember going to the baby groups and I was like, you told me it was 6 weeks, this would get easier, and it's not. And then I went back and I was like, you told me it would be 8 weeks. And I remember going, it's 12 weeks postpartum, you told me this would get easier. And it's just not. I ended up getting thrush in my breast and she got thrush in her mouth, and there was reflux, she had colic. It was just super hard to be the one in charge of feeding the baby. Now my partner did say, do you want me to help? Do you want bottles? Do you want, you know, I can take night foods? And I would just point blank refuse all help whatsoever, because I felt like I had to do it. I feel like I had to, you know, like I was feeling if I gave her a bottle or if I couldn't breastfeed her, or it just felt like that was some kind of almost attack on me and who I was and as a mum. So I had to feed, I had to do it. And there was times where she'd be latched on and I'd just be like in pain, and I'd be screaming in pain because my boobs were so red and they were so raw. Like even standing in the shower was painful. It was just excruciating, and no matter how good a latch or perfect the latch you could have, it was still excruciating. So for us, it took a long time to establish feeding and for it to be comfortable and just good, just to enjoy it. It took a long time. So in the time of having birth and the breastfeeding, fitting the role of being a new mum, I just got lost. And even within 4 weeks in, I hated parenthood. I had no love towards my baby. I didn't feel any connection to my baby whatsoever. She was like a chore. She was something that I wanted to be, you know, fed and watered and put to the side so I could be alone, so I could have some time for me, so I could just not feel like the walls crashing in, is the only way to describe it. I just really needed this kid, this baby, to not be on me. That's not really what newborns do, you know, most of them want to be on you. I didn't want to provide that for my daughter because I didn't really know it was a thing. It sounds stupid, but I didn't know that that's just what babies do. They just want to be on you. They don't want to be in the cold crib. They don't want to be, you know, in a foreign place. They want to be on you. And shockingly enough, that's where she slept the best. 4 weeks in, I was already seriously mentally ill. Not knowing that I was mentally ill, my world had already changed. I was already pushing my partner away. I was already having intrusive thoughts that he was having an affair with an imaginary person. She was imaginary because there's actually no person that I ever thought it was. I just created this person to fit this narrative, and I named her, and I could tell you her hair colour and what she wore, and she had glasses, and it was insane. But that was already in my head. I had already made up this other life and this fantasy where he hated me, he thought I was ugly, he thought my body was ruined from childbirth, my stretch marks were grotesque, my boobs had changed, my hips got wider, we won't even speak about the vagina. Everything just reiterated in my head that I was unworthy, I was ugly, I was unattractive, I was this really toxic mother to my kid because I didn't love her. I felt ashamed, I felt alone. Other mums loved their baby and I didn't love mine. I tolerated her at best. When I mean tolerate, we need to get it clear that when a mum feels like that, it doesn't mean that she neglects her baby. In fact, it's usually quite the opposite. I was so intense with making sure she had everything she needed. Like, the reason I got so ill, I feel, was because she was my sole purpose. She was my sole aim and goal, was to make sure she was happy, to make sure she was fed, to make sure she was warm and clean, and you know, she was thriving. The more she thrived, the more I pretty much died inside. I breastfed her through tears. Like, I didn't have to do that, I didn't have to put myself in that position, but that's for me what my mental health did. It put her, you know, complete top priority over me while I just crumbled underneath. And that is not the way. That's not a parenting hack, by the way. At one point I did break down. My baby was still, she was a month old. I screamed at her and I pushed her away from me, and I just completely broke down in this bed because she had been feeding on me all day and she wouldn't nap and she wouldn't leave me alone, and I didn't sleep. She didn't really sleep unless she was on me, but we were so fearful that something terrible would happen to her if she slept on me that we always picked her up and put her in a cot beside us, and obviously she woke. So she didn't sleep, I didn't sleep, and I just broke down this day and I just screamed that I hated her and I pushed her away and I begged her to leave me alone, and I just rocked and screamed at the top of my voice that I hated her, and that was a pain that I internalised. I didn't share it with anyone. I didn't tell my partner. I just felt so ashamed and so bad. It's like the word I would use to describe. And it's 5.5 years ago and it still upsets me. Every time I say it, it upsets me. It's just one of those moments that you'll never forget. Even though you know now to do something like that is a breaking point, and that may be indicative of mental illness, you know? Like, that is up there. Things you could probably diagnose that one, to be fair. I remember watching a video about another mum feeling like that, and that's the moment that I knew that I was ill. After that day where, you know, I screamed at my newborn baby, I just didn't tell anyone about it. I just, you know, kept that in, felt ashamed, felt lonely, felt awful. And things just kind of, you know, spiraled from there. The isolation and resentment grew more. Like, I actually hated that my partner went to work and that I was stuck at home with this baby. And that's where the thoughts of he doesn't love me or he doesn't find me attractive. I thought he was at work having a laugh and joking with all these other people while I was at home stuck with this baby that just wanted me 24/7. You kind of feel trapped. You do feel the walls closing in on you with this tiny baby that everyone says is the best thing to happen since sliced bread. And for me it just wasn't. And it just only grew and grew, and I became more recluse and more warped in my mind to the point where my partner worried for my safety. He thought when he went to work he was scared what I would be doing at home, and Not that I would ever hurt the baby, it was always much worse than that. Like, would I take my own life? Would I take my life and the baby's life? There was a day where he came home and he thought that's exactly what had happened in the bathroom, and he was banging on the door and screaming and shouting on me, and the whole time I was in a different room trying to get this baby to sleep. And then I was so angry that he was shouting and banging when I was trying to get this baby to sleep, and I couldn't see that he was terrified banging on this door. I couldn't see it. I just didn't, I thought he was being dramatic and being ridiculous, but he was terrified of what I would be doing in there, because he's seen the illness before me, and I didn't believe that I was ill. And he would show me things and say, I was reading online that sometimes breastfeeding can make mothers ill. The stress of it, the toll of it, the hormones, or the imbalance. And he tried to convince me to stop breastfeeding and let him feed sometimes, but I just refused, and I didn't believe it. I thought, no, breastfeeding is the best thing. It's liquid gold. It's just something that you have to do. It's something you have to get through. It's meant to be hard. Whereas now I kind of think, I don't know why I did that. I don't know why I pushed through breastfeeding. Totally, was it worth it? Was it? Fuck. I wasn't looking at my baby going, oh, I'm so lucky to be breastfeeding. I hated it. Like, I actually hated it. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why I persevered so much and done that to myself. So it was my partner that seen the illness before me, and he tried to convince me that I wasn't right, but I just wouldn't listen, ever. And I can't remember exactly what point it was that I broke down, because we had argued for weeks. I was pushing him away, I was not speaking to my partner, I was silent. He would come in from work and try and speak to me, and I'd give him one-word answers, or I would just ignore him, basically, because I was so mad, I was so frustrated, I was so angry that I was stuck with this baby. I resented him. I resented the change in our relationship. I resented that we weren't intimate and we didn't hug or we didn't kiss, or there was, well, he's not going to hug or kiss somebody that actually won't speak to you. It's logical, but at the time I took that to be that he didn't love me or fancy me or want to be near me anymore. He just kind of kept me about, because it was easier to keep me about than to start a new life without me. So I had totally built up this other life that I was living behind, and he tried desperately to break through and get in and make me see sense, but I always rebuffed it every time. And even the day where I broke down and I sat at the dining table, and I just remember him hovering around me, and then I just broke down and I said, I'm so lonely. I'm just so alone. I just felt so alone and so lonely, to the point that for the previous weeks I had threatened to kick him out. I had told him that I didn't want to be with him, that I could do this myself, that I didn't need him, I didn't want to be with him anymore. I couldn't do it. I just couldn't be around him anymore. I was so heartbroken and so convinced that I didn't need him in my life, that he didn't love me, that I wanted him to go. Now, we'd been together for 10 years by this point. There's nothing in a relationship to ever suggest anything, anything other than pure love and support. Honestly, it's one of those awful Disney romantic relationships. It's beautiful. There's nothing there that would ever suggest anything bad. But I had taken it and made it, and listened to the thoughts in my head and made it into something that just wasn't true. And rather than living with it, I wanted him out. I wanted him gone. So I had tried to throw him out numerous times before this. And that day when we sat at the table and I said, I'm lonely, and he was the one that pushed me to go and see the GP and get help and get medication, because I was completely against medication. I thought it meant you weren't doing motherhood enough. You were failing almost, like you're a medicated mum. After I went to the GP, I took the medication. I got antidepressants, a really low dose, because I was breastfeeding and I didn't want to be on medication. But they did help, they did level me out. So I was keen to get off them for whatever fucking reason. Obviously I had a breakdown again when I came off them, because I was still dealing with intrusive thoughts. I was still, we're talking a year down the line, I was still thinking really negative about my body, really negative about my mind, really negative about friends, and I couldn't feel people. I could see friendships, but I couldn't feel people. I couldn't feel connection to anyone. I just felt like a really shit and toxic mother, that I was somehow going to damage my child by her being around me. So, you know, when that happens, you're going to have another breakdown. And that's exactly what happened. And again, it was me threatening to throw him out. I was like, you need to leave, you need to go. I had been fantasising about running away. I had fantasised about how could you stop this pain and this hurt? How could I protect people? Suicide did cross my mind. I never actively planned about it, but you have the fantasy of, I would do it here, or I would do it here, or what would be the best and easiest way, or whatever. And the thought that always stopped me was like, I can't have my daughter growing up and just knowing me from memories and thoughts or stories or pictures, and people going, oh, you're so like her, or you're like, this is like her, or, you know, I couldn't have that for my daughter. I did fantasise about running away and, you know, emptying the bank, and when I would do it and how I would do it, and taking the car or getting a train or just going somewhere and starting a new life, because somehow that appealed more than staying in the life I had and believing that I was a good mum. It seemed more appealing just to run away. And again, I never did that either, but I thought about it. I thought about it a lot. Thought people wouldn't miss me, and I'd be protecting everyone. I'd be protecting my partner, because he could move on and find someone that actually loved him and that was in love with him and would treat him good and support him and not drag him down and not, you know, belittle him and shout at him and scream at him and make him have to deal with these constant chats of my mental health and have these thoughts about how ugly I am and need reassurance constantly. The biggest part of my postnatal depression journey, is that even the thing? I don't know, but that's what I'm calling it, is the fact that I believed that I was a bad mother, more than a bad mother. I was a toxic mother. I was a toxic person. I was someone to be removed from people, someone that could make other people ill or upset or angry. I said things and I'd done things that were all an action of postnatal depression. And like, in my right mind now, I can't believe some of the things that I would say. I can't believe some of the things that I would, you know, do or test, or, you know, I would say things to my partner like, I'm not in love with him anymore, which I genuinely, you know, it got to that point of, you know, 2 years down the line after having a kid, I was still suffering with postnatal depression, to the point where it had removed people. It had just like mentally just removed people from my mind. It had built up such a barrier, is maybe the right word. It had built up such a resistance to people and it wanted to remove me so bad. Was not in love with my partner after, you know, 12 years of being together. The mental illness had warped it so much into such a point that it just removed me from him. Couldn't feel any connection to him, which then impacts everything in my life. You know, I couldn't be intimate with him, I couldn't make love with him, I couldn't stand his touch on me, I couldn't. But all the whole time I wanted his touch, I wanted a hug, I wanted to be comforted, I wanted to know everything was okay, but there was something inside of me that made me fall out of love with him. And it was terrifying to look at someone that you've known for a large time of your life and not know who they are, to feel like they're a stranger, to just not believe any of their words. You know, how could he love me? I was horrible, I was mean, I was nasty, I wasn't worth loving, I was a bad mum. I shouted at my baby, I screamed at my baby, I screamed at my toddler, I lost my temper, I was filled with rage, I had a tongue on me that was huge. And for me, that was the biggest thing that I had to work on. My postnatal depression went really deep, it went really inside. And I've never had a mental illness, so I don't know how it works or whatever, but for me, from my perspective, what mental illness does to a person is find almost like your kryptonite, what it is that is really going to send you over the edge, what it is you fear, and it goes and it just explodes it and it makes it your reality, and it makes you believe that's what it is, that I was a pest, that I wasn't worthy of love, that I was a poor mum, that I was toxic, that I would break my family, I would break my child. She would grow up to hate me. She'd grow up with mental illness because I had it in the way I treated her or behaved with her. And that's what I had to come to terms with. And that's when I went to therapy, what we worked on and what came out, and why I felt like that, where it came from, past traumas or issues that I had. And there was a lot of inner work done, questioning myself, questioning why you have these thoughts. And I call them my mind demons. I kind of separate them from who I am, because mental illness is not who you are. It's something you can have and experience, but it doesn't mean it's you. I had to be brutally honest. I had to just get it out and say it. I had to go to therapy and be honest and say anything that was holding me back, or how I felt, or like I felt like a bad mum. And sometimes it takes for a stranger to really question you, go, why do you think that? Why would you ever believe that? It would take for my partner to go, can you not see the bond that she has in the way that she looks at you? But I would always go, she looks at me like that way in fear. She has to love me, I'm her mother. And he'd be like, no, that's not the case. That's not why a child loves you. So after that second really pivotal breakdown of wanting to throw my partner out again, I did go back on medication and I went to therapy. And just sharing what was on my mind when it was on my mind really helped. So whether that would be with my partner, I started a blog. I then went from the blog to Instagram, and I just started sharing with other mums how I was feeling, why I was feeling that way. Trying to make sense of it and getting out your own mind really helped. Just saying it out loud and for someone else to go, oh yeah, I feel the same way, really helped. So I continued doing that, and I kind of made sense of a lot of things. I made sense of symptoms like isolation, loneliness, rage, resentment. It really made sense to see other people feeling the same way or relating to what I'd said. And that's what really helped me climb out of the pit of postnatal depression. Like, you can climb out of it. I'm so reluctant to go, I did it, so you can too. Because not everyone's going to go into a therapist chair and have a chat to themselves. Why do you think your partner doesn't love you? Oh, well, let me tell you why. And then you go, well, that's absolute bollocks. That's embarrassing. Not everyone wants to do that. Not everyone just goes, fuck it, I'm just going to say it. Like, I understand. Whenever a mum reaches out to me and says, I feel like a monster of a mum, it pains me, clearly, because it's a lie. Because I know that's a lie. I know that pain. I've been in that pain, and I've believed those thoughts. I've had times where my 3-year-old daughter has had to hug and console me because I broke down, and I've shouted at her, or I've screamed at her, or I've snapped at her, or I've been really unkind, because I'm battling such demons that just place you in a place of stress and frustration and pressure all the time. So it wouldn't take much for me to flip or to shout or to be overwhelmed by noise, by sound, by, just feeling hassled. And I felt like a monster, and I felt like that's not what mums do. They don't get support with their kids, and I just felt awful and so ashamed and just like a monster. That's the only way to describe it. So when people say to me that they feel like a monster, it really hurts me, because it's not true. You're a person going through something. Your mind is making you believe something that's not true. Your mind is belittling you. Your mind is damaging your self-worth. Your mind is telling you that suicide is a better option than staying and being a mother to your kids. It's not true. 5.5 years later, I'm not on medication, I'm not in therapy, but I'm still always going through mind demons. I get intrusive thoughts less and less, but they still come up from time to time. There's still days where I catch myself being suspicious of what my partner's doing or what he's thinking. Well, there's still thoughts and doubts there, and that's something that I think I'll always have to work on and always have to get through and continually grow and learn about. But it doesn't mean that you can't conquer postnatal depression. The most important thing I learned from having postnatal depression is you're really not alone. People just don't necessarily chat about it. My postnatal depression was so bad, and it took such a toll on myself and partner, that we both wanted another child, but made the choice to not have another child for a long time. It was difficult to even broach the subject of having another kid after the years that we had been through. And for a lot of people, that's what happens. That's how severe and how powerful postnatal depression can be. But luckily, gradually got better and felt that having another child was something that we really, really wanted to do, and I would regret not doing. We had another baby, and I was fine. There was no illness. There was, I was terrified the whole time. I was terrified through the pregnancy. I relived a lot of triggers, a lot of trauma that I didn't know what would happen through the pregnancy, and then was terrified from the birth, obviously, from the first one. It is possible to be very ill and heal and have another child and have a completely different experience, to love him as soon as he was born, to feel that bond from breastfeeding that I never had, didn't even think was true. It is possible to go on and have the motherhood that you always wanted with the first one, and grieved and was robbed of for a long time. I was robbed of my firstborn, and that's something that I had to come to terms with, and will always be painful. Will always be painful to look at those pictures of her as a baby, and it will always be painful to know that was taken. But that was my journey into parenthood. I got to have my second baby and enjoy every moment, well, within reason. I mean, newborns are absolute guff. I didn't hate it as much. I didn't enjoy it either, because babies are just babies, aren't they? But it is possible to get out of postnatal depression and enjoy life again. And you might even actually like motherhood. You might actually enjoy hanging out with your kid. You might like crafts. You might even like baking. I still don't like baking with my kid. I've got my limits. Do you know what I mean? If you relate to anything that I've said, or you think someone that you know might be feeling the same way, then the best thing to do is to reach out, is to speak to someone. Now, I know not everyone has someone to speak to, but there is someone. I found people online, I found blogs, I found people on Instagram. I obviously had my part. The best thing to do is to reach out and to speak out, and then just let that weight come off your shoulders. Make it okay to say that you don't love your baby, that you hate your baby, or that you hate motherhood, or you're alone. Parenthood is one of the hardest, most isolating, terrifying and beautiful things that a human could do, but it's not easy. But it doesn't have to be that hard.